She had never used a power tool in her life, not once. And then she walked away from one of Australia's toughest industries, bought a bare block of land in the bush, sourced a pair of steel shipping containers, and started building herself a house, alone. That woman is Jas, known to her audience as Barefoot Jas, and the channel she built alongside that house, Building a Dream, has become one of the most quietly compelling DIY stories on the platform. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how she got here, what's actually happening on that property right now, and why this story hits differently from every other creator built a house channel you've ever watched. The Australian mining industry is not a soft place to spend your working years. Western Australia sits on one of the largest concentrations of mineral wealth on Earth. Iron ore, gold, lithium. The extraction of those resources built entire towns in the red dirt interior, and the workforce that makes it run. The people operating machinery in temperatures that can exceed 40 degrees Celsius, working fly-in, fly-out rosters that pull them away from their lives for weeks at a time. Those people tend to either make peace with the grind or eventually reach a breaking point. Jas reached hers. She spent years working in the mines. The details of exactly what she did day to day, the specific role, the specific site, those she has kept largely to herself. What she has been clear about is what that time gave her: money, patience, and a slow-burning clarity about what she actually wanted her life to look like. The mines are a means to an end for a lot of people in Western Australia. For Jas, the end was a piece of bushland and the freedom to do something with it. What made that decision unusual is not that she left. People leave difficult jobs all the time. What made it unusual is what she decided to do next, and the fact that she had no practical skills to do it with. She said it herself, directly to camera, when she launched her channel. A year before she started filming, she had never touched a power tool. No carpentry, no plumbing, no electrical, no construction experience of any kind. She didn't hire people to close that gap. She closed it herself. And if you think that sounds straightforward, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. The block she bought is in Western Australia, in an area of bushland that in the early videos looks exactly like what it is. Raw, untouched, unglamorous dirt, with grass trees scattered across it, and no structure in sight. The plan was not to build a conventional house. The materials she chose were shipping containers, sea containers as she calls them, and the approach was sustainable and economical. Not just budget-conscious, genuinely considered. The idea was to build a home that sat lightly on the land, rather than imposing on it, using materials that already existed, rather than demanding new resources. This is not a new concept in Australian self-building. Container homes have been documented across the country for years, and the appeal is real. The steel shell is already structurally sound. The units are modular, and second-hand containers can be sourced for a fraction of the cost of conventional building materials. What is considerably less common is a first-time builder with zero construction experience attempting it alone, on camera, in one of the hotter and drier climates on the continent. She launched the Building a Dream YouTube channel in February 2024 with a channel trailer that stated the premise plainly. Join me as I build a house out of shipping containers with no experience, on a budget. No dramatic hook, no exaggerated promise. Just the statement of what she was doing, and an open invitation to watch. The scope she described was bigger than just the containers, though. She was explicit from the start that this was not just a container home project. She was building a homestead. Tiny houses, water management systems, gardens, a complete off-grid property built from the ground up, piece by piece, with her own hands. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. There is a particular moment in the early life of the Building a Dream channel that viewers who have followed from the beginning still point to: the footings. Before the containers could be placed, the ground had to be prepared. Footings, the concrete bases that support the structure and transfer the load of the building down into the earth, had to be dug. On a build like this, that means physically excavating holes in the ground, placing the formwork, and pouring concrete. On a professional site, this is machinery work. On Jas's block, in those early months, it was handwork. She dug the footings by hand, not partially, not with help. She picked up a shovel and dug into the red dirt of Western Australia herself, on camera, until the holes were the right depth and the right diameter. Then she poured the concrete. The significance of that moment is hard to overstate for anyone watching from the beginning. This was not a woman who had come to this project with a background in construction and was simply choosing not to hire help. This was someone who had arrived at that piece of land with essentially no physical building skills, and was acquiring them in real time, on camera, in front of an audience that was growing as she worked. It established something about the channel that carries through to every video since. The education is real. When Jas figures out how to do something, she shows the process, including the parts that don't work the first time, the things she had to learn by doing wrong, the moments where the physical reality of what she was attempting was harder than the plan suggested. That authenticity is not a production choice. It's the only approach she had available, because she genuinely didn't know how to do any of this before she started. And that's when the decision was made, the one nobody around her saw coming. Every channel that builds a lasting audience does so because there is something in the format that cannot be replicated by anyone else. For Building a Dream, several things come together in a way that is genuinely distinct from the hundreds of other off-grid build channels on the platform. The first is Jas herself. She is not presenting herself as an expert. She is presenting herself as a person learning, and learning visibly, with all the uncertainty that implies. The name Barefoot Jas is not incidental. She actually works on the property without shoes across much of the footage, a detail that speaks to something about how she relates to the land she is building on. It is tactile. It is present. It runs counter to the protective gear, liability-conscious, safety-first framing that most DIY content defaults to. The second is Django. Her dog accompanies her throughout the build, showing up in the footage as a constant companion and a genuine personality. Jas has called Django her soulmate. Not ironically, the dog grounds the channel in something warmer than the physical project alone. The third is the scope. Unlike channels that document a single structure and then face the question of what comes next, Building a Dream was built with a vision large enough to sustain years of content. The container home is the centerpiece, but the water management systems, the tiny houses, the gardens, and the other structures that Jas has committed to building mean the channel has a runway that extends well into the next several years of production. She never talked about all of this publicly in one place, until now. There is a category of event in every long-form build series where something happens on camera that is beyond what the creator can fully prepare for, and it becomes the defining footage of the channel. For Building a Dream, one of those moments is the container delivery. Shipping containers do not arrive quietly. They come on the back of a truck, and placing them on a prepared site requires either a crane or a tilt tray truck with enough clearance to maneuver on terrain that is rarely perfectly cooperative. On a bushland block in Western Australia, with a self-builder who has dug the footings by hand and prepared the placement positions herself, the margin for error is extremely small. What viewers saw in that footage was not a polished highlight reel of a perfectly executed delivery. They saw the reality of a moment that Jas had been working toward since she broke ground on the property. The containers came, they were placed, and what that meant, what was now sitting on her land, after everything it had taken to get to that point, landed in a way that the camera captured and the audience felt. That moment matters to the story of the channel because it is the point at which the concept became physical. Before that, Building a Dream was a plan, a vision, a trailer, and a series of videos showing a woman digging in the dirt. After that, it was a structure, an actual steel structure on her actual piece of land. The number of people who found the channel in the aftermath of that footage is not something that has been confirmed publicly, but the trajectory of the channel's growth correlates with that period in the build, which is consistent with how self-build channels tend to grow on YouTube. The container delivery is the moment the audience can see with their own eyes that this is real. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got, until now. Most coverage of Barefoot Jas and Building a Dream focuses on the container home. The structure, the containers, the footings, the walls going up. That is the visual centerpiece of the channel, and it is the project that drives the primary narrative. But there is a dimension to the project that receives considerably less attention from outside observers, and it matters to understanding what the channel actually is. Jas built a jetty. On her property, in addition to the container home and the main structure, she constructed a private jetty herself, from scratch, on camera. This is not a simple carpentry project. A functional jetty requires planning around load-bearing, water conditions, anchoring, and materials selection. For a first-time builder with no construction background, it represents a significant escalation in the complexity of what she was attempting. She built it anyway. The jetty matters because it signals something about the nature of the project. This is not a person who set a modest target and executed it carefully. This is someone who consistently expanded the scope of what she was attempting as her skills developed, adding complexity as confidence grew. The container home is the headline, but the full property vision, water systems, gardens, additional structures, the jetty, reflects a scale of ambition that is easy to underestimate from the outside. Third-party analysis of her channel, published in early 2025, estimated the total value of the property, containers, caravan, and equipment at approximately $250,000 Australian dollars. That figure is an external estimate and has not been confirmed by Jas. What it does suggest is that the investment she made when she walked away from the mines, the money she saved across those years and directed into that bare block of land, was substantial and deliberate. She wasn't running away from anything, she was building towards something. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. The question that the title of this video asks, what really happened to building a dream, tends to get asked about channels that have gone quiet. Creators who disappeared, projects that stalled, builds that ran out of money or momentum or both. That is not this story. As of 2025 and into 2026, the channel is active. The build is ongoing. Jas is still on the property, still filming, still acquiring and applying skills she did not have when the channel started. The container home is progressing. The broader homestead project, the water systems, the additional structures, the garden, is developing alongside it. The timeline she set out for herself was never short. The full project, from the early assessment, is expected to take another 2 to 3 years to fully realize. That is not a sign of failure. That is what building an off-grid homestead from a standing start, without professional help, actually takes. There has been no confirmed controversy, no public falling out, no monetization drama, no disappearance. The channel simply exists as it always has, as the ongoing, unedited, real-time documentation of a woman building something. What the channel has gained along the way, beyond the structure itself, is an audience. People who check in regularly not because they are waiting for the house to be finished, but because they are invested in the process, in the figuring it out, in the version of Jas who shows up on camera each time with whatever the next problem is and works through it. That is a harder thing to build than a container home. And she built both. There is a pattern that runs through the history of YouTube's most durable creator stories, and it is not the pattern that most people think of when they imagine success on the platform. It is not the viral moment, not the algorithm spike, not the single video that changes everything overnight. The channels that last, the ones that accumulate genuine audiences over years rather than months, tend to be built the same way their subject matter gets built. Slowly, consistently, with evidence of real progress between one episode and the next. Building a Dream fits that model in an almost literal way. Jas launched the channel at a moment when the self-build and off-grid content space on YouTube was already populated. There were other container home channels, other solo builder channels, other female-led off-grid content. The thing that distinguished Building a Dream was not the concept, but the fact that Jas was genuinely starting from zero, and that the audience watching could track the distance between where she started and where she currently is. That distance keeps growing. Every new skill she acquires on camera becomes part of a record. The footings, the containers, the jetty, the walls, the framing of her bedroom door. Each video adds a tile to a picture that will eventually show a complete homestead where there was once empty bushland. And the people who have been watching since the early days have a stake in that picture that newcomers to the channel don't. The channel's description still carries the line she wrote at the beginning. A year ago, she had never used a power tool in her life. She put that line in there not as a boast, but as a promise. A promise that whatever she was going to learn, you could learn it with her. She has kept that promise, consistently, episode after episode. The real story of Building a Dream is not a story about what went wrong. It is a story about what happens when someone decides, clearly and without a safety net, that they are going to build the life they actually want, instead of the one they are currently in. Jas walked away from the mines, bought a bare block of land, and started filming herself learning how to build a house. 2 years in, she has containers on the ground, footings she dug by hand, a jetty she built herself, and an audience that has watched every step of it. The homestead she has been describing since the beginning is taking shape, piece by piece, on a timeline that reality demands, rather than one content schedules prefer. The next chapter of Building a Dream is already being filmed. The build continues, the skills keep expanding, and the property that was once empty bushland is becoming, gradually and visibly, exactly what she said it would be. The question I want to leave with you is this. Jas walked away from a stable mining career with no building experience and no backup plan, and built something real. Would you have made the same call, or is that level of risk something you could never justify? Let me know in the comments below.